Again, thank you for being here and thanks for inviting me. Um, I'm bonniek-feldenkrais, for those of you who I'm sure don't know me. I mean, there's many of you. I went to New York City massage school back in 1980, and at the same time, Moshe Feldenkrais came to do his training program. So I had started the massage school in New York and stopped it for a semester so that I could study with Moshe Feldenkrais. And for those of you who don't know Moshe Feldenkrais, he was a big thinker. Let's put it that way. He was a big movement person. He was a judo master, but he was also a mechanical engineer and a physicist. So he really worked on himself to find out how his old patterns actually interfered with his ability to heal his knee. So he started looking at how do we learn patterns. So it was a big deal. And if you think about it as a child, when they're born, right? How many of you are mothers or fathers or grandparents? There's nothing there. How did they learn how to roll over, to sit, to stand? Did they use a map of any kind? So he began to think they must have a map. And they don't have a map, but they must build a map. So how do they build a map? And they build it through sensing and taking action. So the first thing for Feldenkrais, the map, was the mouth, because that's the
Thank you.
first functional movement that we made, which was to eat and suck. And then we found our fingers, and then we found other places, and we started to use them to grab. So that became part of our map. Now, Feldenkrais is now known for being a pioneer in neuroplasticity, because back in 1980, when I studied with him, the two neuroscientists or people who won proved that there was no neuroplasticity. In other words, if the brain or the nervous system gets damaged, there's no possibility of it recover or finding something new, finding a new path. So that was the environment back in 1980. And 45 years later, here we are, and neuroplasticity is a possibility, but what is it? And how do we begin to embrace it and use it in our practice? So how do we use the nervous system? And again, I'm talking to all of you who are career massage therapists, and I know you know that the nervous system, you wouldn't have muscle action unless you had a nervous system that could work, right? And you know that there's a nervous system, neuromuscular system. But you still think, I think most people still think that there's mostly muscles. And in action, people start to think in mostly muscles. But there's the neurological and there's the skeletal aspect of that. And the more I began to think, we use this inner skeleton. Do we have an inner skeleton that supports us? And can we start to use that more and appreciate that more, to why some muscles seem to be tight, why some patterns keep interfering with our ability to heal as well as move and rehabilitate in any way, form. So even if the problem isn't a result of old habitual patterns, the old habitual patterns can interfere with your great work of rehabilitating someone, because the brain is continuously wanting to return to that old pattern, the same path that we've always taken, the same slippers that we love to wear, the same foods that we love to eat for different things. We can go away from it, but we like to return. When I came to Florida in 2001, I started teaching CEs courses, and I began to think, well, how do I work differently? And one of the things I came up with was this idea that I touch to inform. Now, what does that mean again? I'm touching to try to engage specifically the brain map. Okay, so again, as I said, Feldenkrais's idea was that we built this map. And what happens though is we start to use this map as a child. We've created all these patterns, and yet then we stop creating new ones. And therefore, and we also start getting into old patterns that doesn't use all parts of us. So then it gets disappeared in your map. So what I'm saying is, back in 1980 was a new thing. These neuroscientists in Boston were watching pianists, and they saw that with fingers, this part of the brain lit up. Then a pianist injured himself in one hand. And so then there was still light with this one hand, but no light with the other because it hadn't been used and it wasn't being used. So that's when this phrase, I'm sure you've heard, and if you haven't, we have a use it or lose it brain. If you're not using a part of yourself, like the thoracic spine when we sit all day or we work all day, then it gets lost in our image of action. So we don't use it. We're not using it, so we don't use it. So that's what I find so fascinating, that if you look at people's patterns, your own patterns, your clients' patterns, it's really telling you a huge story of what's in their brain and how they operate from, what their organization is. For instance, even today, I was working with a pianist, and she is got a lot of things on her shoulders. So she's walking around sort of like this, and it's hurting her hips, and it's hurting her knees, and it's hurting everything. I said, now, when you go on stage and start playing the piano, how would you walk? Well, she walks with her aligned. You know, she's much different. Her image of action for playing or for walking on stage is totally different than walking around taking care of all the things she has to take care of in life. So it's that use it or lose it brain that I find to be so very interesting. And so today, well, with Touch to Inform, I created that, and it's using the principles of the Feldenkrais method, and it has evolved from these 2-hour introductions, which is what I started with 25 years ago, to 6 hours, to 14 hours, and now I have 15 hours. Each seminar is 15 hours, and I have 6 seminars that for the whole program.